a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I feel honestly super honored to take part in this conference, and I'm excited to be with you all. We have amazing people up here on the panel tonight. So I'm going to say a few things, and then I'm mostly going to focus on making sure that they share things with you and with each other that I hope and I believe will be helpful for the moment that we are currently all living in, which I think we can all agree is a pretty serious moment. And it's also one where, thank God, there's still joy, and there's still family, and there's still connections. So I also want to do two quick thank yous. I can't really see with the light, but I think they're in the room. I know they're here. I want to thank, first of all, the board chair of LA Voice and the executive director of the ILM Foundation, who was on the last panel, Umar Hakim. Thanks, Umar, for all your support at LA Voice and the work that we do and the work you do on your own. Real blessing to work with Brother Umar. And then I also want to thank my friend Dr. Hadab Tarifi, who's the chair of the MPAC Foundation Board, who's here and is also a member of our new Deeper Roots Clergy and Spiritual Leaders cohort, interfaith cohort that we just launched last month. So can we please give it up for Hadab, please? Let's do some intros, and then we're gonna do a show of hands around something, and then we're gonna get into it. All right? So I just want to make sure you know who's sitting up here. I'm not going to share their stories for them. They'll have an opportunity to do that, but you just might not know who everybody here is. Maybe you haven't looked at your program, but you have longer bios in the program if you want to see more about these amazing individuals. But first we have Maimuna Hussein Kuttan, who is immediately to my left. Amazing person who runs the TIA Foundation. You need to check it out. They can find you online. They can find you on all the social medias. And she's going to be here sharing about her story and her and her family's refugee story, and helping us to focus in on the question of refugees, which we all know is really important at this moment, through her own experience. Then we've got my new friend. We just got to meet today, so very excited to meet Syed Jamal, whose story you may have read. He's from Kansas. And he's going to be sharing about his story of being taken away from his family and being in detention and then being released from ICE custody and the struggle that was. Then we have Romulo Avelica-Gonzalez, who's right here, who actually we helped fight for his case, but we didn't actually meet in person until right now, although I was with his amazing daughters at some of the protests that happened. And so Romulo is here to both share his story, his experience, and his advice for us. And then we've got Ricardo Mireles, who started many years ago, Avance Latino, just down the street from us in Highland Park. And he's one of the core folks who made sure that Romulo's story, along with his family, made sure that Romulo's story got out. And he's the one who has the historic relationship with MPAC. So let's give it up for everybody up here on the panel, please. Let me do just two last things before I ask Ricardo to set up something for us. So first, if you yourself or a close friend or family member is a refugee or an immigrant, would you please raise your hand? Okay, just look around the room, keep your hands up. So we just want to start here because we just want to recognize that not every story is on this stage, right? Your stories may not be up here or isn't up here, but there's a lot of stories of refugee and of being a refugee and being an immigrant in this room, and we just want to honor that and thank God for it. The thing that I think we don't need to say much about is that you all know that we're living in a moment where immigrant and refugee communities are increasingly under attack. It's not new, but it's definitely worse. Our organization, LA Voice, organizes with 55 churches, synagogues, and mosques across this county, and the increase in people's fear is palpable, and it's based in reality. The folks up here on this stage, as well as others across our county, many of whom or some of whom you may know, and stories we don't know, are still getting picked up in places where they shouldn't be, whether it's dropping a child off at school or going to an ICE check-in that they think is going to be no big deal, and it turns out it is a big deal, or going for a regular check-in thinking that because you're 85 and you have Parkinson's, you're not going to be deported, and actually they tell you to pack your bag and show up. So the moment we're living in is obviously a difficult one. That's why this panel, I think, in hearing these folks' experiences is so important tonight. So with that, I just want to ask Ricardo to tell us a little bit about the connection between particularly Syed and Romulo and the schools and the families. And yeah, it's yours. So tell us a little bit more.
First, I also just want to repeat the thank you for MPAC for making this possible. Salam and Lori, thank you. It's always easy to see the differences, right? What does a Mexican have to do with a Bangladeshi, right? Muslims and Catholics, I don't know, there was something 1,000 years ago about that, right? And Kansas and California, very, very different. But what we want to point out is what's the same here. And this is, I think, your message, right, is almost everybody raised their hand to your question. And so where are the similarities here? And sometimes the challenge is to actually find them and to do something with them, with those similarities. So in this case, the story of Romulo has been documented very well and was covered extensively. That story got out. Then through that process, kind of watching the media, is when I caught the story of Syed and the Jamal family. Right? And through their GoFundMe page, which happened to be very successful, and as a measure of this kind of support that they got, I learned the identity of the person from the school that his children were working at that were trying to support the family. So another big champion here is Marcy. And so I reached out to her, who immediately called me back, and I was able to share the story of Romulo's case, which she knew. And we were able to say, hey, watch for this, watch for that. The attorneys here did this, the attorneys there did that. And it became a close connection. Before Syed was released, we hosted at MPAC. We had the two families introduce themselves through the power of technology, through a video conference, a video chat. And it seems kind of awkward, but my hope is, and I think this is what happened, is the kids on both families kind of looking at each other through the screen of like, oh, okay, you can do this, I can do this, right? And the power of Tassin and Nahin and Farid with, in Kansas, and here in Los Angeles, Fatima and Yoleni, being able to look at each other and say, oh, okay. So finding those things that are the same sometimes ends up being harder, right? And in this case, there's a role that the schools played. And this is a message that has come to our school since in the cycle, and unfortunately there's been so many cases like these, but in this cycle it was somewhat early for the case of Romulo in February 2017. And so lots of other schools started to call our school, hey, what did you do? How did you do this? Academia Avance, as a charter public school, joined other public schools, and we created the Coalition for California. All California schools are sanctuaries, casas, right? And helped push what eventually became AB 699, the law that got passed to support families, right? And so the similarities here is these are both gentlemen with families, both gentlemen with kids. They're in schools. What can the schools do? Communities that stood up to support them. And so this is an example which goes against the news that we see every day. Oh, more people getting this presidency attacking families in a new and another way. When are we going to hear when our side wins? Well, here it is, and not once, but twice. And I think the message that we will hear from these gentlemen is, okay, what about everyone else who's still in there? What can we do for them?
Thank you, Ricardo. So, Romulo, le quiero pedir que comparta ahora, por favor, un poquito su historia, lo que fue su experiencia, para que la gente pueda entender un poquito lo que es estar ahí, experimentar esa separación en lo que quiera compartir, y después vamos a pasar al hermano también, pero y Ricardo va a ayudar con la interpretación, ¿verdad? So Ricardo's going to help out with interpretation, and Romulo is going to share a little bit of his story now and his experience.
Hola, mi nombre es Romulo Avelica y pues estoy aquí con ustedes para compartir un poco la historia, que fue un tiempo muy difícil para mi familia, para mí.
So Romulo says he's here to tell his story and tell a little bit about the challenges for him and his family.
Todo el mundo sabemos que estamos pasando un tiempo muy difícil, nosotros los inmigrantes, y en especial pues los latinos, y a nosotros nos ha tocado esta situación difícil.
So we're all familiar with the challenges that are coming against immigrants and especially on Latino immigrants.
Es muy inexplicable porque este país está hecho de pura gente inmigrante.
And the challenge is that this seemingly is not understandable because this is a country of immigrants.
Que es un país de muchas oportunidades. Cómo quisiera que esa palabra no se usara para hacer diferencia.
And so this is a country of opportunities, but how he wished there wouldn't be a word that focuses so much on differences. So that the word immigrants is used to separate us.
Yo creo que todos tenemos la oportunidad de trabajar en este país, que es un país muy rico, y más que nada tener respeto ante toda la gente.
So we all have this opportunity to work in this country that has so much opportunity and wealth.
Mi historia en lo personal fue muy difícil, ya lo dije anteriormente, pero gracias a Dios, con la unidad de la comunidad, estamos luchando ahora para tener un mejor futuro, mi familia y yo. Y quisiera invitar a toda la gente para que tuviéramos igualdad, respeto, y también a toda la gente que estamos aquí.
But the story of the challenges for him and his family now are actually well known. But he wants to really emphasize how we can come together for equality, igualdad, respect,
Igualdad, respeto y democracia.
and for democracy.
¿Le puedo dar hacer una pregunta? Sí, un aplauso. Yeah. I'm gonna ask a follow-up question. Yo no sé si la gente entiende, y si no quiere compartirlo está bien, ¿ok? Pero yo no sé si la gente entiende un poquito sobre las condiciones adentro, en este público. Entonces me gustaría que compartiera un poquito de lo que es la situación para las personas que siguen ahí adentro del centro de detención, para que la gente entienda. So what I'm asking is, if he is willing, because I know it's not easy to share, that maybe not everybody in the room is kind of aware of the conditions that people live in inside the detention center. Maybe you are, but I don't think it hurts to be reminded. And I also just want to remind us that the particular place where most folks go from LA County is a private, corporate-owned facility owned by GeoCorp. They have some new name now, but it's the same publicly traded corporation. So literally, folks who are enriching themselves on the backs of families like Romulo's.
Sí, es muy difícil, como lo he dicho anteriormente, para todos los inmigrantes detenidos en el centro, porque es un trato muy, muy injusto, muy difícil, unas condiciones extremadamente no son para humanos. Agua caliente, cuarto frío, son extremas condiciones.
So there are many challenges, and the injustice is easy to understand. As an example, very, very hot water for the showers, very, very hot water, and then rooms that are overcooled in terms of the air conditioning.
Servicios médicos, la alimentación, también es un grave problema que existe en ese centro de detención. Y pues ya lo hemos comentado mucho en las entrevistas, y creo que ha funcionado un poco, porque hace 2 meses fueron inspectores a hacer un chequeo por sorpresa, y encontraron todas esas condiciones malas que yo estoy diciendo.
So there's also conditions with the nutrition and the medical attention, but he wanted to point out that he believes the attention that has been brought to that is making a change because recently, I think 2 months, I saw those messages 2 months ago, there was a surprise inspection at the Adelanto Center, and that sure enough, they confirmed these conditions with the expectation maybe something would happen.
Just kind of last follow-up question here. I think a lot of people have the impression that, you know, like 85% or 90% of the people in that detention center are Latino. But, you know, I didn't learn from you, but I learned from your friend, Pastor Noé Carillas, who was also in Adelanto and who is now home with his family wearing an ankle bracelet that he has to pay for to a private company, about actually the diversity of folks from all over the world who are in there. So I just wondered if you would just maybe say a word about that.
Sí, en el centro de detención existe gente de todo el mundo, hay mucha diversidad de gente, no solamente así como lo describen, que los latinos somos criminales y todo eso, de que ahí en el centro de detención existe mucha gente de todo el mundo y se trata uno de unificar, trata uno de estar unido todo el tiempo. Y eso es lo que yo quisiera hacer, es un mensaje, un llamado a toda la gente para que nos unamos y combatamos esta situación que estamos pasando ahorita. Esta administración Trump tenemos que destruirla.
So he's paraphrasing here, but that there is a very wide diversity and that the entire world is represented in this detention center that he was. And that they tried to seek unity inside, but that he wanted to bring this message to us now that he's out, that we need to stop this attack and that we have to stop this administration from continuing.
Not on behalf of anyone but himself, he said, destroy the Trump administration. So, and I heard applause from many. Just want to make it clear, that's just Romulo speaking for Romulo. Although I agree with you, brother. Thank you for sharing. And we're going to, in a minute, we're also going to just appreciate you and your families as well. But I want to get our brother Syed to tell us a little bit about your experience and take a minute to walk us through both what happened and some of the surprises that came out of that in terms of who showed up for you. So the floor is yours. Take a few minutes.
Thank you very much, Zach. My pleasure to be here. So the story, it's a moving story. I'm hoping I can put it all in sequence. So, I mean, it was a shock. And so the detention, I was taking my daughter to school and there was a knock on the car door and 2 officers had shown up. So I was arrested. My daughter is crying. She asked me, "Are you going to come back, Dad?" And I emphatically said yes. And that was a very moving, and it happened, correct? So, I mean, I said yes. So then my wife came out, my children, they wanted to see a warrant. And there was hardly any warrant. The officers didn't have one, and they were acting on an older order which had emanated from an agreement that was made with the Department of Immigration. So then I was detained for 55 days. And as Romulo said, it is like a United Nations, and in there, all kinds of people, you talk, you share their, you know, you hear, you see actually. What you hear is the story of their families, how they're suffering. And you learn, you can read there, but you miss your family and your community. And, you know, we have talked, many people know about sometimes, you know, food and some detention facilities are okay, I mean, but they vary. Sometimes people, of course, have problems with temperature control, food quality.
You got moved around a couple times, right?
Correct.
So you weren't just in one place.
Yeah, so I was moved around. One was okay, the other one had some of these issues there, yes. And so then there was an attempt to send me out of the country. As you might have known, some people, yes, so it was reported in the media. And I was caught unawares because I was actually, I'm thinking, okay, this is happening, but then I'm being told, okay, well, you're being moved closer to your family. And so, thanks to this whole community support, so it starts, community, your family, my brothers, their friends. We have family all over the states and actually all over the world and friends. That does help. And then in this community where I was, in Lawrence, Kansas, we have been there. I've lived there for a long time in the greater Kansas City area. And then my children go to school. It's a wonderful community. That community rose up when they found out to help my cause. And there was like a sort of a movement. So social media, one of the churches in the area, and the Islamic Center, the church is Plymouth Congregational Church. We have some wonderful people there. I could get some names later, but I'm giving the overview of the story. And so the social media campaign started. The news media picked it up, and I really thank them because they were pretty much instrumental in spreading the whole thing. And then people started letter writing campaign. And as you know, all politics is local before it becomes national and international. So the very first letters that went were to the people in the city, the local city governments, correct? And those people then started contacting the state, and the state to the federal, and So that's how there was a political support built up, thanks to the community again. And then, of course, like I said, social media. One of the things that helped us was the federal court. So we were confident, and I knew about it. We knew about it. So it took some time, and so I spent about 55 days before. Thanks again to community support and public pressure. The federal judge released me on the 20th of March. So after 55 days, I was released. My lawyer, Rekha Sharma, she filed for the release habeas corpus. And then I could see my family within those 55 days. Yeah, I mean, it does change you. I mean, you experience things that you've never seen before. And then here I am. After that, I have like one lady in the library, and we're telling now, I remember her because she showed up at the court. So very unlikely alliance, People of all stripes, people of different faiths, even political affiliations, people came together. And when my wife was there at the courthouse, and Zainab Chaudhry, she mentioned, she said, like, I see different types of people, some we didn't even know. And some people from other areas around us came. And that really made a difference, how people work together, And so after that, we have been through, the case is going on. We will be before a judge, seek relief. We are hoping that we will prevail with all of your support. Thank you.
Yes. So just before I invite your voice into the room, which I'm eager to do, I just want to ask one last thing here. Could we invite, I know your families were incredibly instrumental in both your release as well as, obviously, it's your family. It's like the people you miss most. So it's difficult for people to relive this and share it and tell it. And both Romulo and Syed's family are here. I just want to ask them to stand. And I would like to ask everyone to please give them, a serious applause, like you're sending them as much love as you possibly can. You got to send them more love than that. Come on, they've been through it, guys. They've been through it. You've been through it, you know what it's like. Send them love.
No más separaciones de familia.
Amen.
Amen.
No more family separations.
And Zach, if I can just insert in there, since I'm so glad that you emphasized the role of the families, and within the family, the role of the kids, because the media really focused on them, and they were thrust into a spotlight that they didn't didn't want. And the media kept coming back, tell the story again, tell the story again, tell the story again. And I think they were very huge perseverance, huge confidence to stick it through. And I always explain to the students that are at my school, Fatima and Yuleni, hey, this is going to come back to you 30 years later, is going to start to make sense in terms of what the impact that they have had. And I feel honored to have gotten the chance to meet Farid and Tassin and Nahin here today, and for them to personally meet Fatima and Yuleni and Brenda and Jocelyn.
You guys going to be the panelists next year. Yes. So Maimuna, welcome. Hi. I'm excited to get add your voice to this conversation, and I want to invite you to share a little bit of where you're coming from with the work that you guys do with refugees and trying to help people really make a home in a place that doesn't always feel like a home. So yeah, share a little bit with us, and then we'll do a little follow-up conversation.
So my story is a little bit of a timeline, so I'll take you through the journey. So in '75, my parents fled Ethiopia. My mom was 12, and my dad was probably 15 or 16 at that time. There was civil unrest that was taking place. And they ended up meeting in a refugee camp in Somalia, so right outside of Mogadishu. If there's any Somalis in the room, the area is called Qoryole. So that's where they met and got married on the camp, and that's where I was born. So my mom got there when she was 12, and she didn't leave until she was 20. In 1983, my father was first resettled by the International Rescue Committee in San Diego. And at that time, they used to have a family reunification program. So we reunited with him, and I pretty much grew up in Orange County. My mom ended her education at 12, so that was probably 7th or 8th grade. I was the first woman in my family to graduate from high school, first person in my family to get a master's degree. And in 2010, I was at Antioch University. And I just, growing up...
Yes.
So growing up in the Muslim community, zakat's really important, giving back is really important. You know, we were always raised, you know, what you give with one hand, yet the other hand doesn't know. And, you know, one thing my mom really cared about was the refugee cause. And back then, there were a couple of resettlement agencies that don't exist anymore. One, actually, World Relief, rebranded into more law immigration work. But back then, my mom would show up to people's homes with basic necessity items, and I would go with her, and I would notice these children did not have the safest places to play. So green space was really something I was curious about, and who had access to soccer fields if you couldn't afford joining these leagues like AYSO, where do you go? So my master's actually was in organizational management with an emphasis on finding out what kind of services were available to refugee children at the time. And I learned quickly that resources were limited. It was very dry in Orange County back then. And I did my project on, I studied my cases like in San Diego, Toronto, Atlanta, Georgia. There was a group at that time called Fuji's, you know, that were really cool and intriguing. And then I came across Soccer Without Borders. So we were connected, Shukri, who is now my husband, connected us to Soccer Without Borders. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they do soccer programming throughout the US and abroad, and their board member was a former soccer Olympian. So we talked, and his name's John O'Brien, and he said, you know, if you're interested, I know you're contemplating starting this nonprofit, but if you're interested in doing soccer, if you could get numbers out, we would definitely provide all the coaches, no problem. You just provide the field. And I thought, well, I could be the lunch lady. I don't play soccer, but I can get the kids out. And my goal was 30, and 64 arrived. And since then, the organization's been growing, and it started with soccer. So my mom was doing the basic necessities, we did the soccer, we're getting our 501c3 status, and then families are now naturally opening up to us and saying, you know, thank you, Maimuna and Olia, for providing soccer to my kids. Can you help them with homework? I can't help them with homework. I don't speak English that well. Maimuna, Olia, you know, I noticed that you're helping my kids with homework. I really need help finding a job. I need help finding English. So TIA ended up being a response to what was happening around us. And through the work, I mean, it just grew tremendously. And I would say around 2013 or 2014, we joined the Orange County Refugee Forum. And that's when we got to meet people like Nahla Kayali, who's in the room, from Access California. There's Sahar Ali from Uplift Charities. I think Sabil is here too. So there were already existing groups that were helping
Y'all can
refugees.
like raise your hands so people
Yeah.
know who you are. Yeah. Okay.
So they were helping refugees with a focus on, you know, employment workshops and ESL and what have you, or basic necessities. So TIA decided, okay, well, our niche should just be the kids. We did take part in a county contract that ended in 2017. Because of the administration, there's a lot of cuts now to refugee work. So we're actually in a transition right now. So we're going from community org model to this government org. Now my mom and my dad's retiring, so they're moving. They want to go to Seattle. And I think the next step for TIA for sustainability would be to go towards the route of social enterprise. And over the years of getting to know the families, they were always so hospitable. So you would go to their homes and they would provide you these meals that you can't find in mainstream restaurants. And you know, there was whispers and talk, especially during Ramadan, like, man, I wish somebody would just deliver me a meal right now that's halal. So we want to respond to that need. And we hosted a audition back in January, and 12 chefs auditioned, and from that we hired 5 from 4 different countries. So our cuisines are from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. And through the catering, instead of relying on government funds, it would be through the catering model that would fund the family and youth programs that we have, which are still operating. We have youth program that's soccer, tutoring, arts, and recreation. We have the adult program that's operated by volunteers. It's called the Family Mentoring. We help with ESL and workforce training. But we go to their home because we know transportation's a barrier. Long story short, 2010, we started with 64 children. This year, we're finishing off with helping 947 individuals.
You better clap. That's amazing. One of the things that is kind of just right now coming up for me is, you know, we're talking about schools, we're talking about families, we're talking about soccer, we're talking about a meal, we're talking about little things that bridge us and connect us, and that they turn into these amazing inspiring either victories or opportunities to help people make a home in a new home or come home. And that's just, yeah, it's just coming up for me right now. The other thing I wanted to ask you to share, and then I want to come back to everybody and have you maybe think about something that I heard Connie Rice say on the last panel. But one thing you talked about with me on the phone earlier today was some of the challenges around funding, and that I was really surprised to hear this. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but there are actually some folks who don't feel like there's some stigma around giving to refugee-serving organizations. Insofar as you're comfortable, would you be willing to just share a little bit about what's going on? Because I know that also there's some challenges around your government funding right now, right? As there's changes in administration, et cetera. And then maybe I don't need to remind us, but I'm just reminded of the shooting in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue. One of the things that the shooters was screaming about was the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which is a refugee-serving organization that serves people from all kinds of places all over the world. So this sort of anti-refugee moment that we're in is not only directed at people, but there's even this feeling of stigma that's spreading to like folks who are like, so maybe just share a little bit about.
Yes, so I think there's a lot of key components in this, but in 2016 is when you saw the shift during the elections. But prior to this administration, refugee work was never a bipartisan issue. It didn't matter if you were Republican or voted Democrat. You helped refugees. You helped those that were in need. But now it's on the table as something that's very divisive. And I've talked to people who said, you know, I really care about the work you're doing, but let me go back and talk to so-and-so. I'm not sure if they feel comfortable putting our logo on this cause. I don't think they feel comfortable giving to this type of work. So it, out of nowhere, became very controversial. So again, you know, the county contract that we were a part of didn't start till 2014. So before that, it was all individual giving. And then now that we're going back to that model of community giving, individual giving, and then just seeing this resistance, it's really disheartening because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, these are families that need support. It doesn't matter, I think, how you vote. I mean, you want to help people on the ground. You want to help people locally. Don't we all care about our neighbors? But that's not the case anymore. Then, on top of that, another obstacle we came across was the tax changes that hit this year. So there's not a huge incentive now to give to 501c3s. And so people who would give a lot more before, you know, they're giving a little less, like their giving is decreasing. There's a lot of donor burnout. So if you are a philanthropist in the room, I mean, I could speak on your behalf. I think that you're just exhausted. You know, there's a lot of nonprofits that are in need. Everyone's asking for support. So you have to pick like your one or two organizations that you already care about, that are already part of your family. And then here comes this new organization that's only been around 8 years. So yeah, so it's been quite challenging. We hit the red twice this year. So we've been recovering a lot of staff changes, but it's happening on a national level. There are organizations like the International Rescue Committee, World Relief, East African Center, HIAS, like everyone's really feeling it right now. And it's hurting us the most if you care about refugee and immigrant causes.
The word I was using before is in terms of to find similarities. And so I wanted to offer one that hopefully people agree is very similar. But if we think of the situation in Pittsburgh, or you know how there's been these kinds of shootings on average now every day, every single day. But I'll point to the one in Las Vegas, or the one that just happened recently here near Los Angeles in Thousand Oaks, and there's often a lot of empathy with this concept of, oh, how random this act of violence looks, and look at the pain and suffering that it's causing the people who died and in this community. And I say, well, why do you think there's a caravan? Why do you think those people are coming here from wherever they're coming from? It's the same thing, right? And so maybe that's an opportunity for us to be able to communicate to people. If you have empathy here, then you should have empathy here.
Thank you. And I'm gonna ask this question to everybody. So if you could please, well, you understand what I'm saying. So in the last panel, Connie Rice talked about when transformation occurs, and Connie said transformation comes from unlikely alliances. That it's when people who aren't normally together get together and do something new, that's when you go beyond kind of the temporary victory or the small change, but you have an opportunity to do something big. And I think both of the stories of our brothers here, as well as the work that you are doing, and even you're walking across the street to MPAC before this ever happened, you know, there's these examples of unlikely alliances or maybe unexpected solidarities. You alluded to who was in the room for your hearing that you might not expect, that we're not sure how they voted. You know what I mean? So I just want to ask each of you, in maybe just a sentence or two, to say a word about an unlikely alliance that you either have experienced as part of this, that you hope to see more of, or one that you haven't seen enough of that you want to see more of. So it's either an opportunity to say, this was one that was really powerful that people need to know about, or it could be, here's one that I am still really hungry for, or I think our community is hungry for.
So an unlikely alliance that we had was with the Jewish community. So my friends are here in the room. They'll tell you from when I first started the organization, I was open to, interfaith dialogue. I didn't want to be branded as just a Muslim organization because there's refugees from everywhere. And we wanted to keep our doors open to everyone, knowing that there were some people fleeing places like Iran, for example, if they're behind because of religious persecution. So it got really tricky, and working really hard on that. And then all of a sudden, I would say around 2015 or so, 2016, there's a pop-up of refugee committees that were created. They're called Refugee Workforce at different Jewish temples. So I wasn't working directly with one particular religious group. If they had space available to us, if they invited us to a panel, if the mosque wanted to collect diapers or what have you, we collaborated with everyone. But this was the first time that I was being really courted aggressively by rabbis, and that was new, for me. So I got to have really great conversations with different temples, and because of that, we're now working with people like Temple Emmanuel, Temple Beth Am, and I would say at least 5 Jewish temples in LA County support TIA. So they collect diapers for us. They come out and deliver diapers. If they can, they volunteer their time. And at this point, just seeing how I was resistant at first about the idea and seeing how beautiful it is, I would love for the Muslim community to step in as well. If you want to create a refugee task force, either at your mosque or at your Islamic center, and call on us to find ways to collaborate, because we've already built out the structure for the volunteers. We just need the people to be there, to show up and to help. And one thing that we've done at these temples that I feel really proud of is when they host events, they call on us to do catering, or they call on us to have refugee clients share their stories. So I invite the Muslim community to do the same.
Awesome, thank you. Who else would like to share? What's an unlikely alliance that either surprised you or one you'd like to see more of? Romulo?
Sí, yo tengo una experiencia muy bonita con toda la unidad que hubo en mi caso, porque pues en realidad tenemos que unirnos todos, porque no sabemos con quién podemos contar. Todos ocupamos de todos en este mundo, ¿ok? Y a mí, pues la experiencia tan bonita que tuve, que gente que a mí ni me conocía, ni yo la conocía a ella, y estaban enfrente apoyando a la familia, apoyando en mi caso. Creo que eso fue lo mejor que me ha pasado en este tiempo.
Paraphrasing, he found it a very beautiful experience to be able to see so many people so diverse that came to support his family, came to support his cause, and that is an example of how we need to stand together.
Yeah, so, throughout my life, and I've been involved in unlikely alliances with people of all stripes, and particularly in this case, as we saw here with my situation, my family, how we alluded to this earlier, people from all types of backgrounds came together. So there were people from churches, people of Jewish faith came, agnostics, atheists came, people from different political affiliations came, nationalities. So we saw there's so much power, and I met, actually I ran into him. He is a mayor of the city there, one of the cities, and he said that wonderful things happen when we all work together, and when people of different types, kinds, work together irrespective of faith, creed, nationality, language, origin, etc. And so we saw this, and hopefully we can continue to do something like that on a national and international level, because in the end, we all want the same things for our children. We were talking to Zach earlier, we were talking, and it's about, and also, the Abrahamic faiths. I definitely know about Islam. It's said that there's enough on our plate, enough on this plate to share for all of us, the whole world, all of humanity. So if we could think along those lines, the world will be a much, much better place.
So there's some great pictures, and this is a beautiful program, Salam, that your staff has put together, but there's a picture here with clerics sitting together, and the one on the right, Father Francisco, was a big help for the case from an Episcopal church in the case of Romulo, and we had MPAC come out, the Muslim community, we had the Sikh community come out to some of these events, and two pieces to describe here is through One LA, there was a connection to many of the Jewish temples, and a gentleman who is a retired professor from Cal Poly Pomona wrote a letter to City Attorney Mike Feuer, who I believe will be joining us, we hope. And there was a key moment in the legal strategy for Romulo where the city attorney's office needed to make an important decision. And although we will never know, but I do believe it was the outreach from the Jewish temples and the Jewish community to him directly that was a big push to make sure that happened. So there was a specific example. But the other one was that on the day that he was detained, if it wasn't the second or the third phone call that I got that morning, it was from one of the leaders of UTLA, of the United Teachers of Los Angeles. And I think that it's unfortunate, especially in Los Angeles, that the politics around public education, around charter schools and traditional schools is so contentious and so hard, and yet immediately here was the call, hey, we see what is happening.
You're at a charter, right?
And we're
so just to make it clear for folks.
Charter school,
yeah.
right? And so this was cut right through. There's differences here, but we see this need, and UTLA understands and sees what Avance is doing, and how can we support. And this particular leader was at every single event when we came out and did the protests in downtown LA in support of Romulo.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to share one here. I think one that stands out for me is, again, going back to your friend Pastor Noé Carillas, who is a Pentecostal pastor in the Assemblies of God tradition from Guatemala. He was detained for, he was probably in there for six months or so. And he knew that there were Muslims that are connected with LA Voice and other organizations that were showing up for him and that were trying to get him out, including especially folks from LALMA, La Asociación Latina Musulmana de América. Marta and Imam Cesar is here. I saw him earlier today, and their crew, they were showing up. And, it's not every day that an Assemblies of God pastor walks into a mosque, to say the least. And it's certainly not every day that he'll go in and pray in a mosque. And we had this experience after he came out, and he showed up with his family to the masjid right there next to USC. And we were doing an LA Voice meeting there with folks from all across the county, debriefing some of what had been occurring. And he got up at the end and he offered a prayer in his tradition. I mean, very, very much himself, invoking the Holy Spirit. And he just asked for this. He asked for this huge blessing on the Muslim community. To me, it was one of the most beautiful moments because I've not heard that, and I think that. What gives me hope is that as we're all under this pressure, there's a huge opportunity for us to be reaching out to neighbors that we haven't before. There's if you ever needed an excuse, please, this is it. And we have got to get better at doing it on purpose when we're not under attack. Or we are not going to meet our climate goals, 12 or 20 years from now. We are not going to figure out how we're going to get the country that we all want, where we all actually belong. And so I want to use that to transition Are you holding up? You have a question? Somebody needs to come and get your question. I want to use that to transition into maybe a last question here, and then I'm going to share, and then after that, yeah, I think we'll be able to deal with this question as well.
In the meantime, impact convention, right? Impact.
Hashtag MPAC convention. Thank you. Keep doing it. So I want to ask, in the spirit of this, what if you could lay out one challenge to everyone who's here and anybody who might be watching on live stream? If you could kind of lay one challenge at our feet here today, given your experience and the work ahead for the kind of country and kind of world we want to build together, you know, keeping in mind that some of the things that got us to where we are, you know, in this panel are, yeah, they're things that feel very small, but also turned out to be really huge and life-giving. Or maybe it's something like really big and imaginative. Like, what would it be? And I'm going to ask you to try to keep it brief. Like, can you say it in one sentence? What's the thing that you want to ask folks to do? Obviously, we all need to look at our finances, and so don't, right, you know what I mean? Like, I want to just say, you need to be continuing to increase your giving to organizations that are doing good work, like folks who are represented up here and the folks that you work with and the organizations that you represent. Obviously, we need to be continuing to show up more. So it's not, you know, those are the obvious things. I think everybody in this room can agree that, you know, most of us are all already doing more, and we need to continue to do that, and we actually have the resources to do it. But what's the thing beyond that? What's the thing that you would ask of folks? Maybe it's internal work, maybe it's external work. What is it? Go ahead, you're ready.
Okay. Oh, I wanted to clarify earlier. I said that I didn't want to be branded as a Muslim org, and some people cringed. Only because I'm not a clergy. I don't have that background to teach Islam. That's all it was. But majority of our families that we work with are Muslim. I would say about 90% are from the Middle East, mainly Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Somalia. But my call to action for the Muslim community here would be to show up. There's a lot of volunteer culture that I see with different churches like Rock Harbor Church. There's also synagogues that really volunteer their time. I invite you to put together a team of people and just show up, collect diapers, volunteer as a translator, visit someone's home as a family mentor. I think the newer arrivals, the newer refugees and immigrants need to see you. And whether it be through the TIA Foundation or Sabil or Uplift or Access, wherever you can volunteer your time that's close to you, I recommend it. If you love soccer, call me, tia.org, and thank you.
We can go down the line, or if someone else is ready, it's up to you.
So, yes, definitely agree with Mamuna. So we all should get involved. Virtually anyone can make a difference. So we some people have time, some people have money, and volunteer activities in your community, giving time to people who need help. If you are someone who likes to write and communicate, then contact others, maybe initiate some actions, try to affect legislation. So it's difficult at this point for me to see how in different states, what support the state can provide to refugees. And the federal, as she was mentioning earlier, there has been some cutbacks and stuff. So, and there's this stigma about helping. It shouldn't be, it's sad. But then private organizations, maybe corporations, if you can ask for their support and talk to people at work, maybe raise this awareness and basically get involved in any way, shape, or form you can, and the impact you will see in the future.
Yeah.
Bueno, yo pienso que la unidad en la comunidad y información. Tenemos que estar informados todos de nuestros derechos, pelear por ellos y seguir adelante con todo lo que nosotros queremos. Eso es más que nada lo que yo quisiera para, pues, como un pequeño, sería consejo, lo que sea, pero la unidad entre todas las comunidades, vecinos, y para que la fuerza sea más grande. Eso.
Antes de que Ricardo interprete, ¿puede dar un ejemplo, algo específico, algo que alguien aquí podría hacer para poner un poquito de esa unidad?
Bueno, sí, lo que se podría hacer como en la comunidad, pues respetarnos ante todo, ¿verdad? Y pues lo que nosotros, cada uno podemos hacer es, entre los vecinos, no fijarnos si es blanco o negro, si es de otra raza. Yo creo que si todos nos ponemos en igualdad de circunstancias, vamos a seguir adelante todos.
So paraphrasing is that he wants us to seek unity by looking past differences, racial barriers or religious barriers, and as an ask, but also as a small piece of advice that if we can use this unity and information to know what our rights are and to fight for our rights.
I also just want to add, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to invite you to share as well. But it's interesting, on the last panel as well, there was a conversation about, do you know your neighbors? And I think that oftentimes, like, this stuff feels so big. And we were talking about this earlier, and pardon me for... we were talking about this earlier, and it can feel like there's so many people who need our help, but there's all these little acts that got Romulo free. And then when he got free, we had hope that we could get Pastor Noe out. And then when we got him free, then we had hope that the next person we could get out. And so there's a way in which the small act of connection and bridging, I want to use that word on purpose, like the bridging that we do every day, are we oriented to bridging to other people wherever it is? And what's the way that you're going to do that in your world? I'm going to actually ask you to talk with a neighbor about that in a second. But first, Ricardo, what would be the challenge you would want to lay at our feet, or the invitation?
A message I've been trying to convey that I have learned from this experience is that as a public school, we have a trust with our families and our kids, and we must use that trust. If you don't do something with the trust that is there around you, then I'm not being a leader, and if in your world you're not being a leader. Use the trust. And as an example, I want to point out how important it is for us to bring kids to understand what this moment is and what they're doing. And so I specifically want to point out to Farid and to Josue, and if I can get them to stand up. Farid, stand up, and Josue. Right? This is a second grader and a seventh grader, and they're
Clap
here.
it up, clap it up, clap it up.
Right? They're here just because a teacher said you should go to this, but complete faith, complete trust that, okay, then I will do this. And unimaginable obstacles, in the case of Farid, flying all the way from Kansas, which, by the way, when they left on Thursday, it was snowing. Right? And there was a 9-hour delay in the flight, and never mind, he's here and he's participating, and believe me, he gets more than we might give him credit for, but trust me, 3-4 years from now, when he's in college, he's going to go, oh yeah, I remember, and now I'm going to act.
So I just want to acknowledge a couple of the questions here, and somebody asked a great question about Yemeni refugees, and I would just invite you to check in with you afterward. I don't know who that person is, but like, would you be willing to talk with them afterwards about the situation in Yemen?
I'll stay over here.
Okay.
I'll stay on this side.
Awesome.
Over there.
And then there's another question here about how ICE basically decides who they're going to pick up. So I would also be happy to talk with whoever asked that question, or if a few people want to, and whoever else wants to be part of that conversation, Ricardo, Romulo, if you want to. It's not as simple as it sounds. And then there's another question about basically like, how do we counter a lie? And I'm not going to repeat the lie, because that's what I learned in Messaging 101. But I think we just have to be really clear about our vision, our values, and the resources that there's a part of me that so this question is about, like, basically it's like, you know, lies about immigrants and what they are or aren't doing in the country. And I just think we have to repeat over and over again the good stories and get people into relationship with each other. Encounter is what changes us. I really, you know, we all know this, right? We're all emotional beings, much as, you know, speaking as a white man, much as I'm trained not to be. By society, I'm not saying I like it. We got to help people get into encounter with each other. And it's in personal encounter and in group encounter that we're going to break through this stuff. And I really don't think there's another way. Deep listening, and then from deep listening, we can figure out where we're going to go next. So we're gonna wrap up the panel here. I want to give you guys some homework, and then I want to invite any of the panelists who want to say anything very briefly, just sort of like a last word. If not, that's okay. But if there's something you want to say that you feel like you missed, for the good of the whole, as we leave from this place, hopefully excited to build more power together, excited to build the kind of world that we all want together, you know, what might that thing be? But here's my request to all of you. And I would ask you between now and dinner, right? So we're going to have a little bit of time before we start the banquet. I want to ask you to circle up with one or two people and just take a couple of minutes and wrestle with this question of, like, what's the challenge that I'm going to take on that I haven't yet? You know what it is. It's like it's a little thing. Maybe it's a conversation you haven't had. Maybe it's actually acknowledging that there's a difficult conversation that has to happen in your particular community that people aren't having, and that's keeping you from moving forward together. Maybe it's the neighbor that you haven't connected with. Maybe it's some, you know, look, I'm a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, so I'm constantly working on the stuff that has been given to me by this society that gets in the way of me seeing other people the way that I want to see them and that I know God sees them. So I have work to do every day. We all have work that we can do every day, and it's different for all of us. So I want to ask you, please, if you're willing, just say, if you're willing to do this, please just say, yes, I'm willing. If you're willing to do this between now and dinner, please say, yes, I'm willing. Okay, thank you.
Wait, a little bit louder. That was
Go ahead,
Ask
go
it
ahead.
again. No, it's
All right,
your
if
question.
you're willing, please just say, yes, I'm willing to have this conversation. Yes, I'm willing.
Yes, sir.
All right. That is going to help us get someplace. And then ask that person to be your accountability partner. Okay, so is there anything else that anybody else wants to say? And I want people to know that you're writing a book. And it's not done yet, but when it is, you're all going to go buy it. I hope. Inshallah.
So,
Yes.
can I close with a short story?
Please.
Okay, so there's a client of ours, his name's Aja Victor, and he was an asylee from Congo. And when he came to the U.S., it was around, there was a lot of conflict that was happening at that time, the tribes. He came to the U.S. as an asylee through the Mexico border, and the way that works is you get detained for a little while, then you do your case at court. Long story short, he was one of our clients that was getting ESL support. He was invisibly homeless. He was sleeping on someone's couch and learning English, just trying to figure himself out. He got a few jobs through TS support, so he was working at a grocery store, then he worked at a brewery. And at the brewery, he became friends with the business owner there that mentioned something about vanilla beans. And this discussion happened at the time Aja was getting his green card. Aja is now a business owner that imports and exports vanilla beans. You can find him online. It's Aja and Company, and he's one of our donors.
That's awesome. Anything else?
Sí, pues lo último que quisiera decir es a los padres de familia y que nos involucremos mucho en la escuela, nos involucremos con nuestros hijos, pues para que miremos que todo está saliendo bien. Es todo.
So his message is for get involved in your children's lives, in your children's schools, so that then they can see that this is the way forward.
Yeah. So you may have heard, and seen what is happening globally, and I had a good conversation with Zach, and earlier we were talking about it. So over the last 20 years, we have seen changes in how businesses work, globalization, technology, some progress, but along the line, we have also seen demonization of people who look different from each other. There has been a rise in autocracy, autocratic governments. Many parts of the world, politicians trying to divide people using one group against another to get votes, to get elected. So this is a big challenge. And I would urge you, this is our human spirit, to try to, act locally, think globally, and maybe try to ask. Here in California, here in the US, many decisions are made which have worldwide implications. And try to maybe force some change by asking for it. There should be some rules globally. If capital can move, why people, Zach was saying that actually, we were talking, why can't people move? That's the whole point. There should be some people willing to solve refugees, because a lot of times we take decisions that create refugees. And then if you turn them down, then why do you take part in creating those conditions so that these refugees were created in the first place? So it's a human responsibility, and we should all get involved, learn the issues, know people who are different from each other, from you, and try to force some change in a way, meaning peaceful change. You can write, you can contact your legislators. So that's the way to do it. And basically, again, I urge you to get involved, know your neighbors, try to help people. Thank you.
You good? You want to say something?
Yeah, my simple message is along the lines of glass half full, half empty. And so we just finished an election cycle, and it was record turnout, and it hasn't been turnout like this since, I think, 1966, and the number is 49%, right? Okay, well, that means there's still another half.
That's right.
Right? And I tell my students all the time, if you thought these last 2 years were hard, the fight is only now starting. So our homework is to get more turnout. Let's move it up another 50% and get to 75%.
You can clap to that. So we're going to close the panel now, and I just want to echo one thing that was said on the last panel. Someone quoted I'm sorry, I don't know which chapter and verse it is, but someone talked about Lita Arafu, and that God made us into nations and tribes so that we might know each other. So it's been awesome to be together with these panelists today, with all of you. Can you just please give them one last warm round of applause for their bravery? We're going to go upstairs.
First of all, let's all give a hand for Zach Cooper for moderating this wonderful panel. For all the panelists, just hold on a second, though. We have a guest from the mayor's office. The city attorney couldn't make it, so they sent us a deputy mayor, even better. And it's Nina Hachigian, who is the deputy mayor for international affairs. And I know that Maimuna was honored by the mayor at the last iftar, so she just wanted to say a few words on behalf of the mayor.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you so much for having me here. On behalf of Eric Garcetti, we want to say a warm congratulations to this wonderful event, full of insight, full later on, I hope, of celebration. I want you to know that you have a deep friend in Mayor Garcetti, and we've all been quite pained over the last few years to see the kind of demonization that's happening, but you have a friend in us. I personally lived in Indonesia for 2.5 years before I came to the mayor's office. I was the U.S. ambassador to ASEAN and lived with the many hundreds of thousands of Muslim brothers and sisters in Indonesia, and came to know what a beautiful and peaceful religion Islam is. And thank you. And hope the future is more understanding, more peaceful than the past has been. Thank you.